I'll start out by saying I'm pretty passionate about our country, about the United States. I was born and raised in New England, in Vermont. I live here today in New Hampshire. I've had the opportunity to travel the country, and it is pretty incredible. How many of you have had the opportunity to cross our country? Good, so you have one. If you haven't taken the opportunity to make that trek, I encourage everyone to do that. I'm going to tell you about one of my cross-country trips, and it's one that stays with me today because of where our country was at that point in time. I'll say at that point in my life, I guess I was a little more capricious in my approach. I was young. The family had just gotten started. It was July of 2001, and my son Will was born. At that time, I was living in Tucson, Arizona. I lived and worked in Tucson. My wife went to school at the University of Arizona. She graduated, and then we had our son. Tucson was about 2,600 miles from where I had grown up in Vermont. After 1999, my work was 80% in Nogales, Sonora, Mexico. I was working across the border every day, going into Mexico, and running a factory in Mexico. We had moved the factory, so I started in Tucson, moved the factory to Mexico. A little bit of a victim of NAFTA, which was a pretty big deal at that time. So there were a lot of jobs that had kind of crossed the border, gone into Mexico, set up operations, and that was kind of where our business was at that particular time. But I was ready for a change. I was ready to move back closer to my family. I interviewed for a job in New Haven, Connecticut. I was offered a good position, an engineering position in New Haven. And we decided that we were ready as a family, and I accepted the job. So we prepared the move with my wife, Lori-Ann, Will. They were going to fly back to the East Coast, and I would drive back. She was going to stay with her parents, and I would take the car and the cat, Chip. Not my first cat, but one of the cats. So he was going to ride in the back of the car with me. Which seemed to make sense at that time. Then it was a Tuesday morning in September. I was getting ready for work at that time. Turned on the morning news like I normally did. And I saw that the World Trade Center had been attacked. Suddenly all of our plans changed. I ran upstairs, I got to watch what was going on. And we remember these days, of course, if you lived through the time, you remember where you were at that time. And I remember we were preparing for this big move, and this was in the backdrop. Everywhere we went, this is what was going on as we prepared ourselves to get ready. We had an apartment at the time that was loaded up into the back of a tractor trailer. The car was prepared, and we canceled the flights and said, we're just going to drive back. So we piled everybody in the back of the car. It was a Nissan Sentra. So Lori-Ann, Will, Chip, and I started the trek back to the East Coast. So as I said before, if you've never driven the country, I highly suggest it. It's truly amazing to see the change in terrain from the west to the east. The west is very arid, dry, and as you transition into the east, you get into the more fertile, grassy lands. We stopped along the way to see landmarks in every state. We decided when we had an opportunity, we're going to just stop and see what we can find along the way. In New Mexico, we went to Hatch, New Mexico, which is the chili pepper capital of the world. And really, if you look, most chili peppers that are farmed in this country come out of Hatch. In Texas, we stopped in Amarillo, which my wife still complains about how the smell of that town, because the cattle yards that are on the outskirts of town really do waft into the air. In Oklahoma, we stopped at the world's largest McDonald's. It spans the highway. We went to the Gateway Arch in Missouri, which was closed because of the attacks. And oddly enough, speaking with Aaron Hennessy, they were traveling in the opposite direction at almost the exact same time, and stopped there within a day or two of us being there, which was kind of an odd coincidence. In Illinois, we found Abraham Lincoln's homestead. We stopped there, got a picture there. In Indiana, we saw the giant shoe at the College Basketball Hall of Fame. And in Ohio, we stopped at John Glenn's childhood home. In the tiny sliver of West Virginia, you can picture that on the map, we stopped at the Wheeling Country Music Jamboree. My son was only three months old at the time, so we had to stop and get him out frequently, get him out of the car. He didn't enjoy being in his car seat for very long. The cat was pretty good, considering the travel, but we had to stay in motels that would accept a cat, so that limits your options a little bit as to where you can stay. The drive was eerie, as almost no trucks were on the road. The country was still in shock from the 9/11 attacks, hadn't gone back to work yet. On the last leg of the trip, we pushed through from Indianapolis to New Haven. We pulled into New York City late at night. The city was dark, seemed a little ghostly as we approached, something out of a movie. There were no planes flying over until we saw one lonely flight coming over. We were both a little sad and emotional at the power of the moment. We pushed up I-95 late at night. We finally pulled into New Haven. We were relieved at the end of the trip. So I love my country then, I love it today. Crossing the land gives you an appreciation for the beauty of the land and the character of its people. The trip was one of those events that stays with me till today. And I think about it from time to time and reflect on our outcomes. So again, if you do get the chance, take a trip out across the country. It is pretty amazing out there. Thank you very much.